For decades, there's been a little blue and red booth that became the emergency room for the physical objects of our lives. When your school shoes blew a tire 3 weeks into the term, or if you needed to cut the keys for your first share house, you went there, leaning on the counter, watching sparks fly, while a guy in a blue apron performed surgery on your favorite leather boots. But I want you to be honest. When was the last time you actually spent money there? The world that built Mister Minit is evaporating. We used to be a society of maintenance. We had tangible things and we took care of them. Now, we're a society of replacement. We throw shoes in the bin because they're made of plastic foam and we simply don't fix anymore. We upgrade or we buy replacements on Amazon. This isn't just a story about a shoe repair franchise because, frankly, that sounds boring. This is a story about the death of ownership. It's about how technology quietly killed the idea of durability. We're going to look at how a business that was once as essential as the toilets in a shopping center has been left stranded on an island of obsolescence. It's 1957 in Brussels, Belgium. The war was over, the economy was booming, and fashion was back with a vengeance. The new look was in, and the weapon of choice for women across Europe was the stiletto heel, a chic, elegant product that was a structural engineering disaster. You see, Brussels is famous for two things: chocolate and cobblestones, millions of jagged, uneven prehistoric rocks paving the streets. When you take the stiletto, a thin spike of steel and rubber, and drive it into a gap between cobblestones with the full weight of a human being, it doesn't go well. Every single day, thousands of women were snapping their heels, and the solution at that time sucked. If you broke a heel in 1957, you went to a traditional cobbler, artisans who smoked pipes and took genuine pride in their craft, but they also told you to come back in 2 weeks. Donald Hilsden Ryan saw this inefficiency and pounced. He approached the problem with the mindset of a ruthless businessman rather than a traditional craftsman. He understood that the customers had zero interest in the artistry of the repair. They just wanted to walk out of the store immediately with their item repaired satisfactorily. So, he set up a tiny counter in the Aubon Marche department store and called it Talon Minute, heel in a minute. The concept was revolutionary. You simply stood there, watching a technician rip the broken tip of your shoe and hammer on a replacement right before your eyes. It was the 1950s version of instant gratification, and it absolutely exploded. It grew so fast that the name Talon Minute couldn't hold it. As they expanded across Europe, they needed a brand that worked in any language, so they rebranded to Mister Minit and introduced Fred, the little cartoon cobbler who would become the face of the company. The model worked because it nailed the golden ratio of repair. The shoe itself was expensive enough to be worth saving, yet the heel was fragile enough to break constantly. A business holy grail where the core product is valuable, but the failure point is cheap. When this newly minted global empire arrived in Australia and New Zealand, they found a goldmine. Australia is a rough country that's notoriously hard on our gear, from kids kicking leather school shoes to death in the playground to tradies dragging R.M. Williams boots through mud and concrete. As a nation of committed leatherwearers, Mister Minit naturally became the anchor tenant of the new American-style shopping centers that were popping up all around the country. Back then, you simply couldn't build a shopping center without a Mister Minit. It was a fundamental part of the retail ecosystem. Then, they added the second pillar of the empire: keys. Fixing a shoe is hard work. It involves glue, sanding, stitching, and physical force. Cutting a key, on the other hand, that takes 30 seconds. You take a blank piece of brass that costs you cents, you trace the customer's key on a grinder, and you sell it for dollars. The margin on keys was astronomical. Everything was going great until the world changed its shoes. Look at your collection of shoes right now. Unless you work in a courtroom or a construction site, you probably own a couple of sneakers made of knit fabric, EVA foam, and injection molded plastic or similar. This massive shift from hard bottoms to soft bottoms was a fashion revolution that effectively demolished the economic model of the cobbler. We need to get technical for a second here because the death of the shoe repair industry is actually a story about chemistry. Traditional shoes are stitched. If the sole wears out, you cut the stitches, take the old leather off, and stitch a new piece on. You can do that almost forever. Modern sneakers are fused together using heat and petroleum-based glues. The midsole of your Nike Air Max is likely made of polyurethane or EVA foam. These materials suffer from a condition called hydrolysis. Moisture in the air slowly attacks the chemical bonds in the foam, and over time, the foam reverts to its original liquid state, but in a solid form. Basically, it turns to dust. That's why if you find an old pair of sneakers in the back of your cupboard that you haven't worn in 10 years and you try and put them on, the sole will literally crumble like cake. The harsh reality is that you simply can't repair hydrolysis. Trying to stitch a cloud of dust back onto a shoe is physically impossible. When a customer walks in with a pair of crumbling Nikes, the franchisee has no choice but to turn them away regardless of how much they want the sale, because modern glues simply won't bond to degrading foam. Then, you also have the brutal economic reality of fast fashion. If you walk into a Kmart or Big W today, you can pick up a pair of sneakers for $20 or school shoes for $15. Compare that to Mister Minit, where the combination of skilled labor, expensive machinery, and sky-high Westfield rent means a basic reheel and resole might cost you $40. So, as the consumer, are you going to pay $40 to fix a $20 shoe? Of course, you throw the shoe in the bin and buy a fresh pair, contributing to the staggering 300,000 tons of textiles that Australians dump into landfill every single year. This new culture of replacement has evaporated the high volume market of everyday mums and dads that Mister Minit relied on. They're now left fighting for a tiny fraction of the population who still buy expensive leather boots, but you simply can't run a mass market franchise network on such a sliver of the demographic. The golden ratio is officially broken because the product itself is now cheaper than the repair. Then there's the collapse of the key market. For 40 years, keys were the ultimate recurring revenue stream. Whether you lost them, moved house, or needed a spare for a neighbor, the demand was constant. Then, technology changed, and it hit the business with the force of a freight train. It began with the automotive industry in the late 90s. When car theft spiraled out of control, manufacturers fought back by burying microchips inside the plastic heads of ignition keys. This transponder system meant that if the car's computer didn't detect the specific chip, the fuel pump stayed dead. Overnight, the job changed from simply grinding a piece of metal to cloning a digital signature. To their credit, Mister Minit pivoted hard. They invested millions in coding machines and retrained their staff as auto locksmiths, positioning themselves as the sane alternative to the dealership. If Toyota demanded $500 for a replacement key, Mister Minit would do it for $200. It was a solid strategy for a time. Look at a modern car key. Most of the time, it's a proximity fob that stays in your pocket while you push a button on the door or dashboard. The metal blade has been demoted to a hidden emergency backup that you'll likely never use. Now, with companies like Tesla moving to phone as a key, the business model is running out of room to adapt. That leaves the humble house key as the last line of defense, but even that stronghold has been breached. Take Bunnings, for example. They treat key cutting as a loss leader, meaning they're happy to lose money on the key just to get you inside to buy a barbecue or a tin of paint. And of course, you can't forget the keyless locks on some houses now, thanks to the explosion of the smart home. Some people are replacing traditional deadbolts with keypads, fingerprint scanners, and Wi-Fi connected locks that let you open the door for the plumber while you're sitting at a desk 10 kilometers away. The situation wasn't helped when the location itself started to die. If you look at Germany, Mister Minit was once a retail giant running the exact same model of shoes, keys, and engraving. In 2020, that entire network collapsed into insolvency, closing its doors and vanishing from their shopping centers. Reporting outlets blamed the economic downturn, with the collapse exposing a fatal flaw in their business model. Mister Minit functions like a biological parasite. It can't generate its own gravity, and it relies entirely on a healthy host, the shopping center, to provide a healthy supply of customers. If the shopping centers aren't bringing in the customers, then Mister Minit has no one to sell to. This is the exact scenario that keeps the Australian franchisees awake at night. While the recruitment documents paint a rosy picture of family atmosphere and proven systems, and to be fair, the technical training is excellent, the financial reality is far more precarious. Franchisees are paying anywhere from $35,000 to $75,000 essentially to buy a job, securing the right to stand in a kiosk for 10 hours a day. They're then squeezed by Australian landlords who charge some of the highest retail rents in the world, often demanding annual increases regardless of how many customers are actually walking through the door. The franchisee ends up fighting a war on two fronts: the rising cost of occupying the space and the falling relevance of the product they're selling. To make matters worse, the government recently added a massive regulatory burden regarding button batteries, those little silver coins found in watches and car remotes. After tragic incidents involving children swallowing them, new laws mandate strict child-proof packaging and secure locking mechanisms on all devices. Mister Minit had to audit every single replacement shell and every packet of batteries, adding layers of friction and cost to what used to be a simple 5-minute job. So, is this the end of the line for the little blue booth? Well, not quite. The Australian management team is scrappy. They see the writing on the wall and they're executing a brilliant pivot by targeting the tech gap. They realize that while the internet is fantastic for buying new things, it's absolutely terrible at fixing specific, annoying hardware problems. Take garage door remotes, for example. Replacing one is a special kind of hell where you have to find a model number that's been rubbed off, order a generic replacement online, then pray it's the right frequency. Mister Minit looked at that and decided to own that pain. They effectively became the garage remote experts, capitalizing on a high-margin service that solves a high-frustration problem through a physical interface. They're applying the same logic to RFID fobs for apartment blocks. Instead of paying a strata manager $100 and waiting a week for a replacement, Mister Minit can clone your card in 5 minutes. They're doubling down on the one thing the internet simply can't do: the do-it-for-me service. There's a massive demographic, particularly among older Australians, who feel alienated by the digital world and refuse to scan QR codes or use self-checkouts. They want to hand a broken object to a human being and ask, "Mate, can you fix this?" That human interaction is now their premium product, transitioning the brand from a simple shoe repair shop to a concierge for the physical world. At the end of the day, Mister Minit is a survivor. They navigated the recessions of the 80s, the explosive shopping center boom of the 90s, and the global financial crash of 2008. They're not going down without a fight this time, and if history tells us anything, it's that they'll find a way to survive. But they won't be the same. They can't be. The business originally started because Donald Hillsden Ryan saw an outdated practice that didn't belong in the modern world. Now, 70 years later, they've become the outdated practice that doesn't quite fit. They're caught in a strange no man's land as the economy shifts from physical to digital, and radical revolution is the only way they'll keep breathing. But what do you think? Do you miss the days when you could actually fix a broken heel for $10, or are you happy just to toss the sneakers and buy a fresh pair? Do you still carry a cleaner sized ring of keys, or have you fully converted to the digital life? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this deep dive into the retail apocalypse interesting, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.